I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
This is part 2 of Think Like a Nobel Prize Winner. Both part 1 and part 2 are available today. You can download both of them. In this one, we talk a little bit more about what it means to be as curious as a Nobel Prize winner. How do they get that curious? How can we be that curious? How can I be that curious? Enjoy. Why talk to the Allied Moving Company guy and make and I was specifically talking to him because I was making not only a life decision but an investment decision because of it. And I imagine part of being curious is finding a tool set that gives you an unfair advantage. So, for instance, most people make investment decisions based on the same ideas that are in all the books, that are in the newspapers, and so on. But how many people will make a real estate decision by looking at where a moving company driver says he's suddenly seeing a huge amount of people moving from this city to this city, and in one city they make a lot more than the people in the other city. So prices are going to then go up. And I imagine for physicists, they're not just all looking at the same, and probably every one of these Nobel Prize winners has figured out kind of a toolkit they can use that gives them an unfair advantage. And I was curious if you found that to be true.
Yeah, I definitely did. And, I think some of the commonality that I observed is directly related to that. And their issue and their kind of lack of ego. I wonder sometimes, again, if it's causative or it's part of their DNA or what have you, that the types of people that can listen to their critics. Like, it's one thing to be heckled at a comedy store, as you don't have any experience with that, but if you're heckled at Stand Up New York, it's different. Like listening to your critics, like I get all these comments on my YouTube channel. 99% are positive. Some are like, what the hell are you doing? You're a fraud for big physics or they'll just make up stuff like, could you have on this guy or that? And just like make it up and call them names and ad hominem attack and then just leave. And I'm like, why am I even thinking about these people? It's just totally pointless. And I wish I could get, but we also like the accolades. So how do they balance the kind of the benefits of listening to your critics, which is another form of ignoring like the sunk cost. The guy's now telling you, or gal's now telling you, you're wrong. Like, this isn't the way to look for the cosmic microwave background signal. And you guys got it all wrong. You should listen to us. maybe they're crackpots or maybe they're actually very astute, but well, they're certainly in competition with you because, as you said, there's fixed resources. There's only so many students that you can hire. There's only so many publications. You have to go through peer review and get. So all these hurdles and obstacles are in the way in these academic Hunger Games, as I call it. And yet, sometimes if you don't listen to them, it is to your detriment. I always say science is an infinite game. In other words, like nobody's going to win science. Like, I can't win science. You can't win science. So we're not in a zero-sum competition, but it's comprised of an infinite number of zero-sum games, like Nobel Prizes and tenure and funding and graduate students and papers published, et cetera, et cetera. So it's unusual to have sometimes you have to, listen to your critic, who is a competitor to you for resources, et cetera, in the zero-sum stage of the infinite game. And sometimes you have to listen to them, because they actually have the right solution to at least making progress against the infinite amount of ignorance that we human beings will always have, no matter how much we learn.
It's a blessing actually to have critics because
Yeah.
First off, if the critics are wrong, you've inspired some kind of visceral feeling in them that even though they're wrong, they feel the need to criticize you, whether it's positive, constructive criticism or destructive criticism. Second, and I find this to often be true, they're probably right in their criticism. Like not all criticism is wrong. Even if it's destructive, by the way. People say, oh, it should be always constructive. Sometimes you have to kind of translate destructive criticism into something useful because they might be right. And the ability to use that as a tool, I think, is another component of the DNA of curiosity. Because like for instance, I'm not comparing myself to physicists, but like when I wrote the article in New York City is Dead Forever, I had a lot of critics. And by the way, I thought most of these critics were wrong. But then I had to ask myself, why am I getting so much criticism? This is more criticism than I've gotten for any other article ever. And why is this happening? And that in itself became a useful exercise to understand what was going on in my writing that I didn't do other times, or what made this article go viral. Why did people, whether they were correct or incorrect, why were there critics at all? And that became, just thinking in that way, you always have to go, like, it seems like going meta and asking kind of abstract questions about what's happening in general, not fighting the critics, but asking why are there critics? Like, why does this situation exist as opposed to resolving the situation? So it's like the second derivative of the situation.
Yeah, that's right. And we had to throw in some equations.
I think that's an important DNA component of curiosity as well.
Well, one of the things that just keeps resonating, again, a book about physics Nobel Prize winners, if you just picked it up, would you think that they mastered some of the skills that you talk about and skip the line and choose yourself, namely the soft skills, persuasion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you would. But I think it was very surprising to people when I talked about, like, why do I want to listen to a bunch of nerds? And why physicists, by the way? Why not, as you said, I mean, look, if you win the Nobel Prize in chemistry, like Jennifer Doudna, are you less, kind of savvy or less physically knowledgeable than somebody who discovered the lighthouse or invented the lighthouse? Which, by the way, when you have imposter syndrome over Einstein, do you have like kind of arrogance about Gustav Dalén, who won the 1908 Nobel Prize instead of Albert Einstein? Yeah, he was a freaking schmuck.
I mean, probably everything he's done has been disproven by now anyway.
Well,
by the way, it's just like T.S. Eliot's quote. You said all it does is buy
a ticket to your funeral.
Yeah, like I guess more people go to your funeral if you have a Nobel Prize at this point. So there's a story. Groucho Marx. T.S. Eliot was obsessed with Groucho Marx, and they met once or twice, I think. And Groucho Marx went to T.S. Eliot's funeral, and he comes back to L.A. and all his friends are George Burns. They're all these older Jewish comedians and comics and stuff like that. They all said to Groucho Marx, how could you go to T.S. Eliot's funeral? He hated Jews. He was a bad guy. He hated Jews and everything. And Groucho Marx said, that's okay. There's a lot of Jews I don't like also.
That's right. And like one of the Simpsons again, Homer Simpson says to Bart, or says to somebody like one of his friends, Carl or something. He's like, I'll be there for your funeral, man. And then Carl says to him, I'll be there for yours too. And it's like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, you can't both be at each other's funeral. It's not going to, unless you die on the same day.
That's funny. By the way,
this notion
it took me a few seconds to get that one. So that's how, that's 50.
I can't tell if it's like turning 50 or COVID or whatever. but the point, I think is a very crucial one, that these guys have skills that transcend. I mean, some of them, not all of them, but most of them have these skills that it isn't surprising, although to the layperson it might seem surprising. But physicists have this very diverse of curiosity that we have to, often science, all the sciences are depicted as kind of a tree. And the tree has a trunk, a very strong, solid trunk that's physics, because from physics you can derive all the laws of, it said, chemistry. And then from chemistry, you can get the laws of biology. From biology, you can get the laws of evolution, then cognition, and then sociology. And eventually it's Ghanaian poetry in the 16th century. But it all starts with physics. But what is physics? The tree planted in math and philosophy, et cetera, and logic. And so I think that these, it shouldn't be so surprising, but because it kind of is the connecting tissue, literally, between this like ethereal world, which has, as I said in the past, like, you can't hand me a triangle. Like, triangles only exist in our minds, and the concept of a triangle there's no such thing as 3 0-dimensional points that you can hand to me, or how much does a point weigh? It's meaningless, right? So it's not physically embodied. But on the other hand, they also have to be very practical and bridge between sociology. Like, this book is as much about, kind of human nature as, again, like, I don't choose how Amazon puts this in categories. One category, it was #1 new release, and is science for kids, which I was tickled by, having kids. But the other one was in self-help success. And I was like, if you told me I'd write a self-help book along with such luminaries as James Altucher, I would have said, you're great. But now I realize that, like, to whatever degree I've had success, is because I think I do care about the people I'm talking to. I am passionately curious about individual life and humanity as a whole, and why we make certain. So it's a book about humanity, and it is a self-help guide. I'm coming out of the closet. I wrote a self-help book, James, and I'm damn proud of it.
No, it's very valuable, because, again, I think seeing these people, like you say, the soft skills, seeing them talk about that and their struggles. Look, they had to raise funding for projects. They had to
convince peer reviewers.
Yeah, and look, and you also, sometimes it even boils down to, you have to name what you're doing. Like, here, the theory of relativity. That is a cool name. Like, sometimes you have to be creative about how the entire presentation and branding of what you're doing, because you're also trying to show people this is important. You're showing your students, you're showing your peers, you're showing people like the Nobel Prize Committee, you're showing the public, so you can maybe write a book or get in the news, or you have to be able to. And that's a salesman's job. And calling it a salesman sounds cheap, because you think of Death of a Salesman or whatever, but that's really what it is. It's a form of sales.
It's persuasion. And I think you've talked a lot about this on your show. And I think it's incredible. And even being a stand-up comic, right? There are all these skills. You said to me, on many occasions, not just to me, but you said, there's no one skill stand-up comic.
Right.
Well, there's no one skill physics. It's comprised of meta skills and pseudo skills. And yeah, we have this negative connotation with someone that can be persuasive as kind of like, like oily, whatever, snake oil salesman. And we also have these negative connotations, like Barry Barish writes in the foreword to Think Like a Nobel Prize Winner. He's like, curiosity killed the cat. Like if you ask somebody, like a kid, they'll think, like, curiosity, is that negative? And by the way, scientists are prized for their childlike behaviors in a lot of ways. We are very curious. We are very imaginative. We are very, kind of productive in a certain playful sense. We are very inquisitive, and we, have this unbridled enthusiasm. And I say, yes, it's true. We also have all the negative traits of kids too. There's no such thing as like a single-edged sword. I mean, that'd be great to make, but like, we're jealous, we're petty, we don't like other people's success. We have schadenfreude when they fail. We want them, and so we have all these things, because, again, it's comprised of fixed games in the context of an infinite game. And very few people, I think, have that kind of awareness, because, look, on a daily basis, there's not a lot of room for introspection. Like, I don't sit there thinking about, the origin of the universe and the philosophical interpretation as much as I would like to. And I probably do it more than almost anybody I know because, some would say I've got too much time on my hands. But the other perspective is like, we only have so much time until we die. Like, we only have a finite amount of time, and these laureates are going to die someday. I'm going to die. You're going to, unless one of my kids is working on the never dying pill. Talk about branding. Isn't that good branding for the Nobel Prize in chemistry and biology?
It could happen soon. Who knows? I think there are some Nobel Prizes probably that have been. Well, certainly the CRISPR is an anti-aging tool. So
yeah, and I think that's incredibly exciting.
CRISPR, by the way, great branding for a tool that modifies DNA.
I know. I was like, how would you like your genes, CRISPR?
Yeah.
I'd like that to be CRISPR, please. So my son also has another idea that the electron should have been named instead, because the positron, which is the antiparticle of the electron, as you know, the electron is Greek for amber, which is like, who the hell cares about that? But he said, why don't they call the electron the negatron?
Oh yeah,
I was like,
that.
that's actually a much better name, right? Yeah. So like, this kid could be onto something. Anyway, that's my son.
So in addition to these soft skills, the critical question, I guess, really is ultimately, how do they discover something that nobody else has ever discovered before? And by the way, this is not important just in physics. Again, you could do in any field. Like in comedy, you really can't say a joke that's been said before. Then you're stealing a joke, or you're just repeating yourself. You have to constantly come up with something that nobody has ever said, or you have to say something in a unique way that it's never been said that way before to really be great. And it's the same thing.
And it's different than.
Go ahead.
It's even harder, James, right? Because in like art, let's say there's Jackson Pollock, or there's Dave Chappelle, or whoever, James Altucher, right? There's no right or wrong answer in arts, right? It's subjective. It's purely subjective. Like, my toddler can make a painting as good as a Pollock, and actually, she has. But then I think about, somebody else like would pay $100 million for that, right? Or digital art now, like with NFTs, which is really fascinating, and so forth. Like, literally anybody can do it. You can actually take a screen grab and make it into an NFT if you want. So the point being, there's no grade, but in physics, there is an ultimate grader, and it's Mother Nature.
Right.
That she will tell you if you're right or wrong, and she will deny and crush your most basic hopes, which is why to see things like in sociology of science, things like string theory or inflation or other things persist for decades, even without experimental verification or validation, which used to be the sine qua non, the essential essence of the scientific method, which I also have a chapter about in the book, just so people can look and think about, well, how can I apply the scientific method as a car salesman in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or wherever Tulsa is? That being the case, so I think that there is no one way, but there's no one path, but there's one destination. So it's easier in some ways and it's harder in other ways, because you can't work backwards from the punchline usually, and I know the audience is going to laugh. Like, that's my grade, right? As a stand-up comedian, if the audience doesn't laugh, like, it could be funny to you, but who cares, right? So you want to get a reaction that's in comport with where your expectations are. You're working backwards from that. If you knew this would make the audience laugh, like, I have a punchline. I can't say it on the air because it's too dirty. I'll say it to you when we get off the phone. I think I've solved a major problem in stand-up comedy, but I'll tell you later.
The unifying theory of stand-up comedy and improv.
Exactly. That's right. I never came up with the theory of everything in physics, so I had to go to comedy. But there's no right answer in the arts, so it's subjective. But in physics and science in general, there is. So that means that you know where you're going to end up if you're working on a problem.
So Brian, this is what I'm saying. So how, like, for you, how would you even begin? Like, okay, you worked on bicep 1, bicep 2. Your goal was to actually build a device, a special telescope that could detect, odd differences in the way gravitational waves were coming out of the cosmic background radiation, and you would use this to prove inflation. So you stood on the shoulders of giants, or you looked over little people, or whatever you want to say, and you know that there's gravitational waves. You know that they must have been there since creation. You know that cosmic background radiation doesn't have any light through, and one of your Nobel Prize winners has created the mechanisms for detecting gravitational waves. But now you have to make some leap. What was the leap you made, and how do you think you made it?
Yeah, I think in that case, there comes along again with a double-edged sword, blessing and a curse, which is that you have this kind of destination in sight, but you're also trying to get there. So there's get there-itis and there's sunk cost bias, but there's also confirmation bias that, like, when you see things that comport with the thing you're trying to pursue, you're going to be more likely to accept those and more likely to exclude disconfirming signs that you might be wrong, like dust could have been responsible for the signal that you were seeking. And so you'll go to great lengths to kind of accentuate the pathways that conform to the expected result.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS
that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin, or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
What struck your curiosity in the first place? Why did nobody else ever in history do what you were proposing to do? Like, how did you become the first one to do this? Now, part of it is because the state of technology evolves, and so now you're allowed to do this. But where did your curiosity come from that allowed you to discover something new? Again, it's easy to solve old equations, but you're trying to solve a new problem that you've discovered or that you thought about. So how did you come with that initial insight?
So in my context, I think it had a bunch to do with my own, again, maybe grandiose desire to understand, the biggest possible mysteries in the human mind is capable of comprehending, while I still had that, product of knowledge rising up and forgetting falling down. And it happened to coincide with a period of great technological advances and also great, questions. I always say, a great question is one that doesn't, or a great answer, is not one that answers all the questions. It may inspire new questions. And at that time, there were kind of results that were discovered in particular by my late great postdoctoral mentor, Andrew Lang, who tragically committed suicide, as I describe in Losing the Nobel Prize, and grappling with that. But also, he kind of provided this inspiration that he discovered a particular pattern in this radiation. Nobody knew how that pattern got established in the initial conditions of the early universe. And so I said, well, he solved this great paradox describing how the universe looks today, but is there a reason why the universe looks the way that it does? And there were theorists that had conjectured that, yes, this mechanism called inflation would produce gravitational waves, but none of them really kind of made the connection that now we can do it and we don't need this enormous telescope that costs billions of dollars. You could do it on the cheap for a few $1 million, which is what we attempted to do. And for a while, we're successfully perceived to have done so. So,
your insight was basically that, okay, Uh,
I want to do this. I want to understand, was there a Big Bang? Was the universe created as, I mean, again, I've talked about this before on the show. I'm not embarrassed by it, but to say that I wanted to win a Nobel Prize to outdo my scientific father and do him better, just like, kids want to win the Super Bowl. Their parents are, great football players or whatever. So that was one motivation. But the other one was I wanted to basically falsify or prove the description in Genesis 1:1, that there was a creation of the universe.
Okay, and there's a problem, which is that, telescopes and basically any visual instrument depends on light, but light was not getting through the cosmic background radiation. The cosmic background radiation was created 300,000 years after the creation of the universe, or after the Big Bang happened, or whatever. So there's a problem. The problem is there's no physical way to use a normal device like a telescope to see what happened before the cosmic background radiation. And so your insight, standing on the shoulders of giants, was that, hey, not only can perhaps gravitational waves get through the cosmic background radiation, but here's how I could build a device that detects those so far away.
That's right. And looking back, through, again, the lens of history, I do see a commonality, and might be the only one with these laureates, is that they were all inspired by someone. I call it like a father figure, or mentor or whatever in the book. Some of them might have been women, I don't know, but they talk about, and quite literally, they talk about their fathers in many cases. And sometimes it's bittersweet because they win it so late in life, most of them. Not Adam Rees, who's my age. He won it, and his father inspired him to get into
He won it
science,
when he was 41.
Yeah, he was one of the youngest laureates in history. He's still, he's a good friend. I talked to him this morning, send him a copy of the new book. He's convinced I'm stalking him because the second book that has him in it. And then having, people, older laureates like, Barry and Ray Weiss are in their late 80s or in their 80s. They don't have their parents around to be there when they won it in such a late age. So a lot of them were inspired. I was inspired. Again, Andrew Lang was like a father figure to me, the man who committed suicide, whose wife later went on to win or his ex-wife went on to win the Nobel Prize in chemistry.
But this is very interesting. Someone who not just inspires you, but is almost like plays a role of some sort of father figure. And by the way, it's no accident that
like
a
Obi-Wan.
lot of Nobel Prize winners throughout history have been orphans. They lost their fathers young. So maybe their first professors was the first time they experienced as an adult or that kind of fatherly presence. And you're trying to, like you mentioned, just like you're trying to prove something to your father, you're going beyond just normal inspiration and intuition. You're trying to take something they couldn't solve, or they hit a plateau, and you're trying to go beyond them, like a son does. And
in fact,
I think that's I think that should be respected. I wonder if that could even be, cultivate a feeling of childhood with your mentors, to cultivate that kind of curiosity. That's what got you to basically not only be curious, but have the soft skills to raise the millions of dollars required to build your telescope in Antarctica, of all places. So
I look at like the two most famous Nobel Prize winning physicists of the 20th century, Albert Einstein and Richard Feynman. So Einstein was inspired in many occasions to ask questions, but he also didn't ask questions of his father, and he actually credits the theory of relativity to not asking questions as a kid, but only as an adult, when he had the swagger and the toolkit. In other words, if he had asked his dad at age 7, what happens if I travel along a light beam and look at myself in a mirror, do I see anything? He said his father would have just given him the answer that, oh, you see yourself or you don't see yourself, thus squelching the curiosity that would then have deprived humanity, at least for some time. Because again, unlike art, physics and art are not the same. They have a lot of commonalities, and I talk about them in the book, how they are similar. There's no one right answer in art. There is a right answer in physics as judged by nature. But in art, if nobody came up with the theory of relativity, if Einstein didn't come up with the theory of relativity, some other person would. In fact, there are many people hot on the trail.
Yeah, it's one of those parallel discoveries. There actually were several scientists, right, working on the same thing.
Yeah, but if Michelangelo didn't paint the Mona Lisa, or Leonardo, who painted the Mona Lisa? No, I'm getting
Da Vinci.
It's Da Vinci. So nobody would have painted it, right? So nobody would have painted it. They would have painted other pictures of him, but it wouldn't have that mercurial magical spell, right? So there's a benefit to art too. Just like, if you don't make some joke that only you could make, nobody's ever going to make that particular joke.
That's true. But like something like Cubism or, Impressionist art or pop art, things like this probably
styles of art, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, styles of art, sure. And who knows? Now, artificial art is now coming online, right? So Einstein said that he credited not asking his dad on one hand for the answer because it would have stunted his own intellectual growth. And then Feynman talks about after he won the Nobel Prize, his dad said to him, he was very proud of him, and they were very close. And he said, son, I always had this question I was too embarrassed to ask you, but now you won the Nobel Prize, I'm going to ask you. When an electron transitions in an atom from a high energy state to a low energy state, it emits a photon, as you showed in quantum electrodynamics, right? And he said, right, my father. And then his father said, well, was the photon like stored inside the electron, like a little battery? And Feynman said, I don't know. And he said, I never saw such a look of disappointment and depression as I did on that particular day. Like, he let his dad down, even though he had a Nobel Prize. So I think there is something to it. And of course, we don't mean only men can be mentors. Let's be obvious about it. Some of my teachers, but some Svengali, some Obi-Wan, and it's part of the hero's journey, right? Because you go through this abstraction where nobody knows where they're going to come out. They don't even know if an answer exists. I always say, graduate school to my students, it's not like undergraduate school, but harder. The tests are a little harder. There's more advanced, there's more decimal places. No. You don't even know if there is an answer.
Right.
Like undergraduate, somebody's going to get it right, but you're not, maybe. I'm not.
Again, it's the difference between knowledge and discovery. So up until graduate school, you're accumulating knowledge. This is the basic toolkit to basically solve these problems. But then in graduate school, you've got to discover something. You can't just have more knowledge.
Right. It can't just be some incremental polishing of some other theory or something fundamentally new that did not exist until you came on the planet to do it. So I think those are exciting and exhilarating aspects of being a scientist. And it kind of, does take away some of the mundanity of a lot of it is like, you asked earlier, do people still want to do this? And I'm looking at, my students now saying, well, maybe I don't want to do this. So I wanted to ask, before my students leave and go work for Google or Apple or, a lot of them are just like, I don't want your life anymore. And it's just so kind of bemusing in a certain sense because, this is all I wanted to do. And I never thought I could do it because I never thought I was good enough, whatever. I thought and there are people much better than I am. I get to work with them every day. But to have, kind of this notion that here I am, like, am I depressed because I didn't win the Nobel Prize? No, and not at all. And if I did win the Nobel Prize, how would things change? And I think,
well, you wouldn't be agreeing to go on the James Altucher Show podcast, that's for sure.
You mean inviting myself to come on the James Altucher?
No, you have an open invitation, so.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it means a lot to me. This is like one of my, so I've started like to maximize my happiness. One of the things that respected happiness consultants that you've had on your show recommend is like write down like things that you're looking forward to every day. And so like, this is my highlight of the week is talking with you. Yeah, it's so much fun.
We always look forward to it here. And I want to, this idea that these people, these physicists who are at the highest level discovered something new and had this very deep curiosity. I think it is a hard thing to kind of decode the DNA of this. But I wrote down some other quotes from your book. One was diversify your pursuits, which is, referred to in a lot of different books. But I think, it's the idea that, yes, you might be making discoveries about black holes, but it doesn't mean you can't be obsessed with drawing, and maybe inspiration and ideas you get from understanding the nuances of another field will give you curiosity and specific nuances that no one ever has had before in physics. So I like that diversify your pursuits. We talked about ask if there's a better way.
I think the fun aspect is something that's overlooked, because it is like, look, there'll always be aspects of a career that are boring, mundane, frustrating. So how do you get through that? I don't think passion will get you through that. I kind of make the analogy, passion's kind of like willpower. Like, it's great to have willpower, so I won't eat this donut, but it's better to have like a system in play. You've had Jocko on. He doesn't even respond to my emails. Like, this guy, is my neighbor here in San Diego. We have the same birthday, I think the actual birthday, and he won't respond. But Jocko, if you're listening out there, I want to have you on the show because I want to talk about scientific warfare. and how science and astronomy in particular has been used in warfare.
Well, Neil
and
deGrasse
you're
Tyson, by the way, wrote a book about.
I had a book
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there's aspects that I think we could go really deep on. But anyway, he talks about like, discipline, etc. But like there's something that even trumps both of those. And I think it's like it's a real, it's like God, like my kids won't eat, that delicious, Cuban sandwich that you used to get in Florida or whatever, because it has pork in it and we keep kosher, right? So if you look at it from that, like there's no system of willpower, like it's not even a temptation. Like I've never gone down and said, I really like to have that shrimp or that oyster. Like it doesn't appeal to me at all. And, you could say I'm brainwashed or, whatever. I don't think that happens to be the case. I think actually putting the system in place so that you don't have to think is actually incredibly discipline, example of incredible discipline.
Yeah.
So
Accumulating small ways of accumulating energy, whether it's wearing the same outfit every day or delegating some of
decision
your-
fatigue avoidance.
delegating
Yeah, you
some
want to
of your
avoid
stresses,
this.
accumulating
So I
small
think-
advantages and energy. I'm writing these down.
Yeah, I think putting those systems in place so that you can be prepared when inspiration does strike. But if you wait for inspiration and curiosity, I think that or passion rather, like that is a diminishing resource. That's a resource that gets used up. It's a wasting asset, again, to use the economic analogy. And I think, the ultimate goal of the book, again, is really one to not like teach you, like Feynman said a lot of things about the Nobel Prize that it's kind of like Einstein. He always talked about religion so ambiguously. You couldn't tell what he believed, that he didn't believe. Some say he did believe. But anyway, you can use their quotes to say anything. But on one occasion, Feynman would say things like, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, then you don't understand it. And then when he won the Nobel Prize, he said, if I could explain to you what I won the Nobel Prize for, it wouldn't be worth a Nobel Prize. But on the same token, you have to live in that dichotomy. Again, a Jockoism, right? So the dichotomy of leadership.
I think though the methods might be unexplainable because that's the toolkit that you've spent years building. But
yes,
but I agree that and in your book you say seek elegance. Like things are often simpler than they seem. Like don't you have to be able to. It's an important part of accumulating knowledge and wisdom to be able to also teach things in a simple way so that others can understand it. You need to be the giant that other people stand on. Your shoulders need to be the shoulders of that giant. And the only way you could do that, the only way you could be a giant in your industry is if you can explain things simply. So that's like a criteria of being a great thinker.
Right. And the most elegant way to describe something is to describe it simply. I mean, and I do this, actually, I've done this as a parent for some time, not because I really think like my kids can understand trigonometry at age 8 or whatever, but like, what's the first level of acquiring mastery of something? Cialdini spoke about that with you. It's like, you have to learn the lexicon. You have to learn the vocabulary. What are the tools of the trade? Like, if you don't know how a pawn moves, like, you're not going to learn, but you can learn basic things. Like, you might not know how, like, some opening is supposed to unfold or some ending game is supposed to unfold as a kid. But, like, the first step is to understand the lexicon and the vocabulary. So what's the first step of that? And deconstructing those skills is, like, just hearing the words. So, like, every night as I put my kids to sleep, I talk about, the Einstein equation. No, I don't do that. But I do talk about, like, at an early age, just expose your kids to simple things. Like, even I've mentioned in the past, and this is like our next side hustle Friday, has to be the number one problem that I'm trying to solve is like, I want to get in on some of that sweet, sweet telescope scratch, James. So every time I'm asked, like, what's the most simple thing to get my kid interested in STEM and science, technology, engineering, and math? It's get them a $50 telescope and just point it at anything besides the sun, James. This is a doctor of astronomy speaking very carefully. Don't point it at the sun. Don't point it at your neighbor. Point it at anything in the sky, and you will be blown away. And you will, in fact, James, not only be able to make a scientific discovery yourself, but you'll have the exact same experience emotionally, viscerally, physically as Galileo did, in a way completely unlike, say, the Large Hadron Collider. When they discovered the Higgs boson, like, you can't buy a Higgs boson, a LHC accelerator and just go to work. And, that's how they felt when they discovered it. Look, it takes years, it takes billions of dollars. But a telescope, James, you will be connected emotionally to Galileo Galilei. And because you'll replicate exactly what he felt. What the hell does the moon have those stupid craters? Oh my God, it's like the Earth. It has mountains, it has lava.
Right, because here's the thing. I think a telescope leads naturally to questions. Like, you see something in the sky and you ask, what is that? And
Yes.
so and again, it's not just looking at the
Other
telescope.
people invented the telescope, as you know. Other people invented the telescope, not Galileo. This guy Hans Lippershey, and they even think some guy looked at the moon a day before Galileo in England, but he never wrote it up because he was like whatever. But Galileo improved upon it. He asked questions. He used discipline. He used actual a systematic approach to discovery that I think is wonderful. So I want to get a telescope company. I've talked to James Quandarell, our friend
yeah.
James, the other James in my life, I love. And I'm just, but like, how do I get the Keating brand telescope? Because
That's a great idea.
I'm missing out on $50 each time, right?
Biceps.
Keating brand
Bicep X.
Discovery, yeah, the bicep.
But it's interesting though, because you're right. Like that, a telescope is literally a view into the unknown. And
Yes.
and again, you're not going to benefit. Your curiosity is not going to grow if you just look at the telescope and say that's beautiful. Everything I'm seeing is beautiful.
Yeah.
Your curiosity will grow if you say, what is that? And so you have to discover now what that is. Or if you say,
Right.
I wish I could see that better. And you discover how telescopes work and how you can make it better. It doesn't have to be something that's new
Yeah.
to the planet, just new to you. You're practicing
Yeah.
that discovery muscle.
And again, you get that visceral feel. Like, imagine if you could like look at Jupiter and then you could actually like feel the temperature of Jupiter. Like, you can't do that. But actually, with the discovery, which is even more significant than knowing the physical properties, it's made of methane and ammonia. No, you actually replicate the thrill of discovery as done in the first time in human history. What are those little tiny bright stars next to Jupiter at night after night? And then maybe become systematic about it. You get a little notebook. Like I still have my 12-year-old notebook where I talk about all the girls that I hope to ask out and et cetera. But I also had in there some sketches of the Orion Nebula. James, I didn't know it. I was doing exactly what Galileo did, and he was doing what just came naturally to him. So like maybe the book could have been think like Galileo, but I do feel that there is people make it out to be so hard. Like I how do I get my kids interested in STEM, or how do I get them to be like spend less time on the internet? And like there's so many just simple answers, but I guess people don't want to hear them, or maybe they're just scared and intimidated. Maybe perhaps they feel like, well, these kids are going to know more than me and I'll look stupid. And that's another thing, like humility of these laureates. Like one of them told me, I wish I was doing what you're doing. Like, in other words, like, I wish I was young. I wish I could do like young. I'm not that young, but
Wish I was so good looking.
That's right, as you. So I feel like well, it's been an amazing thing for me to learn about. As you know, like I started this project because I wanted to kind of replicate, capture the fire, bottle the magic of Think Like a Billionaire, and replicate that, and hopefully go down future roads with you in different ways. But I've kind of like people are asking me, well, who's the publisher, but not really. Like they're not like, who's the publisher? They're like, how did you get this published? And I'm like, well, I have connections with, James, and connected me to editors and so forth. And, it's all my
you did
material.
a very choose yourself or skip the line kind of strategy, which is also a process of discovery. Like it used to be that everyone thought they needed to use a mainstream publisher, but you could ask the question, well, what if I do it a better way? Like, or is there a better way to do this?
I asked my friend, Stefan Alexander, who I hope is coming on the James Altucher show. He's written two, best-selling books. One called The Jazz of Physics, and he's a cosmologist at Brown University, my alma mater, my oldest friends. And his new book is called Fear of a Black Universe.
Oh,
and it has an endorsement.
I've seen that. I saw it on the bookshelf.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll get him on the show.
Yeah, that'd be
I've
great.
connected him to Jay, and he's amazing. He's a professional jazz musician, a sprinter, and he's a cosmologist. And he wrote, and he got a blurb. I got a blurb from you. He got a blurb from Chuck D of Public Enemy, and
because Fear of a Black Planet was their biggest hit.
Exactly. And it's not about like being a black. It's not really about that at all. It's more about like setting like Hawking, kind of redux with A Brief History of Time. It's now like A Brief History of the Future. But when I look at him, I was talking to him last night because we're just he's like my oldest friend, and I'm like, Steph, how many more books? Like, what's your ideal day? And I want to ask you, James, in the last couple of minutes, what does your calendar look like in 2025? Like, what are you doing? And I asked him, like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm writing books, and I'm getting up, and I'm with my students, and maybe hanging out with my bros, and with my woman. And I was like, that sounds great, but like, how many books can you write? And he said, I think I got 3 books left in me. And I said, well, what would it look like? Tim Ferriss is the other person who inspired me to write this book. Like, he asked these questions, like, what would it look like if it was easy? And I'm like, this is kind of easy. Like, I had these brilliant intellects on my show. Yeah, I had to do a lot of research. I had to have them on. I had Jay to engineer it. I had to find, you to inspire me. But ultimately, like it was much easier than my first book, which I got paid below minimum wage to write, from the advance. I got no advance on this book, but I think it's superior because it's timely. It's going to be actionable. I want this in the hands of your listeners. That's why I made it 99 cents for the electronic version. I don't care about making million. I want to sell millions of copies, or not millions, but I don't care about being a bestseller. I think that's futile. But I do want it to get into the hands of people, as I wish this book existed when I was X age, whatever X could be. But I want to ask you, now that there are so many easy ways to do things and to get actionable stuff out into the public, like if you had the coronavirus cure, but you didn't have it until 2035, great. But, we needed it in 2021, right? So, or some of us would take it. But anyway, the thing I want to ask you is, what is what does it look like? What do you want to do? What is still left within you to be unlocked or to be unleashed on the world? Like, what does your calendar look like in 2025? What's an ideal day?
I have no idea, because I will say that every time I have ever thought what my calendar would be or should be in the coming year, it ended up being completely different. I don't like doing what I don't love doing. So I always try to be as close as possible to do things that don't require me to manifest the energy of love for it. Like I should have that. So, like, for instance, when I started doing stand-up comedy, I wanted to write a novel that year. I ended up doing for the next 6 years comedy. And so I don't know, but I do right now. I am interested in this. In for instance, this podcast. Like we were asking, like, how do these great high achievers? How do they think of these amazing new discoveries? How are they curious in the ways they are? Like breaking that down. I do think adults, people are at our advanced age, can start from scratch in a field and improve and be great and make serious accomplishments in it. And that's what I'm interested in now, is finding different ways into that question. And podcasts like this certainly help. Like these podcasts are for me, and I'm glad that people are listening to them. But I wrote these notes down for myself.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. I'm so glad. Again, I have to give what we say in Hebrew, hakara satov. The essence of the word Judaism, comes from the Hebrew word gratitude, yehodah. And I think that's what defines somebody who has a certain positive relationship and with the universe, if you like. And I want to express gratitude to you for inspiring me to write this book. And hopefully we can continue on this journey together in different ways that the audience will find out about. But now I want to get off because I want to tell you my dirty joke off the air so that I don't sully the minds of any of our listeners.
Well, Brian Keating, author of Into the Impossible, Think Like a Nobel Prize Winner. And you interviewed all these Nobel Prize winners and really broke it down. And I challenged the readers to read this book and tell me some of the DNA of curiosity that you find in this excellent book. So, because I want to know. Oh, I should say the subtitle. There's like two subtitles. So the title is Into the Impossible, Think Like a Nobel Prize Winner, and the subtitle is Lessons from Laureates to Stoke Curiosity, Spur Collaboration, and Ignite Imagination in Your Life and Career. And
with a foreword by
James, a total imposter in this community, James Altucher, alongside Nobel Prize winner Barry Barish.
Yeah, it's as close as you'll get. Maybe. But we still have to work on our theory of everything. Well, James, I want to thank you, and I want to offer your listeners to go to my website, briankeating.com. I've got some bonus material. It's basically all there. It's all free. You don't have to buy the book, but we did make it 99 cents so people would get it. And hopefully people can really appreciate it. I'd love to hear from people. Join my mailing list. And otherwise, look forward to many adventures, including a new audiobook, first time in history, with your former guest, Carlo Rovelli, and yours truly, reading the words of Galileo Galilei in the dialogue.
Excellent. I look forward to that. So, all right, Brian, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The McNugget Buddies are back. But this time, they got a fresh look as part of the new Kerwin Frost box at McDonald's. We're talking all new buddies, dressed head to toe in the freshest fits, all designed by the artist Kerwin Frost. So when you order the Kerwin Frost box with your choice of 10-piece McNuggets or a Big Mac, you'll get one of the flyest McNugget Buddies to go with it. Think you can collect them all? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it.
at participating McDonald's for a limited time while supplies last.